Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at a concept that's, well, it's pretty dramatic, but it is incredibly practical. We're talking about reaching a metaphorical Red Sea in your life. You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. Or, let's be honest, we're going to be there eventually. It's that moment you make a massive decision. You leave a place of dependency or comfort behind, and bam, you suddenly find yourself standing right at the edge of the water. The past is firmly in the rearview mirror, but ahead of you, just endless uncertainty, and the wind is absolutely howling. It's that exact spot where fear whispers, or honestly probably screams, that you should just turn around and go back. So what do you do when the way forward is invisible? I mean, it's the ultimate test, isn't it? What exactly are you supposed to do when the path ahead isn't just hard, but literally invisible? When every logical fiber in your brain is screaming that you've made a terrible mistake, and it's telling you that retreating to the comfort of your old habits, those old fears, or even those old financial traps is the only safe option. How do we actually handle those terrifying moments?
That brings us to Section 1, Facing Your Red Sea, and the obstacles we hit after leaving Egypt.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's step into one of the most famous historical narratives of all time. Imagine you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the Israelites. You've just stepped out of your comfort zone, leaving behind generations of absolute oppression. You prayed for freedom, you witnessed literal miracles, and finally you are free. And this brilliantly illustrates how we often think the hardest part is completely over, right? But then you reach the sea. You look behind you and there's dust rising because the Egyptian army is approaching fast. You look ahead and it's just water stretching farther than the eye can see. No boats, no bridge, zero visible solutions. If you're judging this situation purely by what you can see, hope seems mathematically impossible. But think about it. How often does our modern life feel exactly like that? You finally make some real progress only to instantly smash into a massive obstacle. Like you finally get serious and begin saving money, and out of nowhere, your car's transmission just decides to explode. Or you take the leap to start a business and this crippling doubt hits you right before you land your very first customer. Maybe you commit to learning a new, highly valued skill, and suddenly the whole process just feels utterly overwhelming. Look, facing these immediate obstacles right after you make a good decision doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Actually, it means you're exactly where the growth begins. Which leads us to Section 2, when fear speaks loudly and the paralysis of obstacles. When we hit these walls, fear has this funny way of immediately shaping our thinking. Just like the Israelites staring down Pharaoh's army, we completely forget the power that freed us, and we start longing for the false safety of the past. Fear is incredibly good at shrinking our vision, and honestly, the voice of financial fear, it's incredibly consistent. It sounds exactly like this. What if I fail? What if I lose my hard-earned money? What if this entire plan just doesn't work? Or what if everyone realizes I'm actually not qualified for this? Now, let's be fair here. Those questions aren't inherently wrong. True wisdom absolutely considers risk, but fear doesn't just want to consider risk, it wants those specific questions to turn into permanent roadblocks that stop you from ever moving forward. Now, what's really interesting about this side is the stark contrast between these two mindsets. Take a look at fear on the left. Fear shrinks your vision. It takes the obstacle right in front of you and magnifies it until it literally fills your entire windshield, all while minimizing everything you've already overcome. But then look at faith on the right. Faith doesn't just ignore reality. It doesn't pretend the army isn't behind you or that the water isn't deep. Faith actually considers that harsh reality, but it remembers that God is present within that reality. It's a profoundly grounded, realistic way to approach life. Okay, moving on to Section 3. Courage is not recklessness. Let's talk about this mindset shift. So how do we actually bridge that gap between paralyzing fear and grounded faith? Well, it starts with defining biblical courage. It's simply preparation combined with faith. Listen, we aren't advocating for some impulsive gambling with your future, and we are absolutely not suggesting you refuse wise counsel. True courage isn't putting on a blindfold and pretending the obstacle isn't there. No, it's doing the hard work, running the numbers, and then having the belief to step forward even when the final outcome isn't perfectly guaranteed. We call this the steward's process. It means you plan carefully. You study diligently, you seek wisdom from folks who have actually crossed their own seas, and you count the real cost. A wise steward does all of that. But, and here's the crucial warning, so hear me out, there is a massive difference between waiting for wisdom and waiting forever. I've seen people spend years, literally decades, preparing for opportunities they never actually pursue. They get stuck in the preparation phase simply because, well, it feels safe. Let's jump into Section 4, taking the next step. the step right before the miracle. Eventually, all that endless preparation hits a point where action is completely necessary. And that brings us to one of the most honestly mind-boggling parts of the whole Exodus story. God gives a ridiculously simple instruction to Moses. He just says, "Tell the Israelites to move on." I mean, just think about that for a second. Imagine hearing that command while you're standing directly in front of an uncrossable, raging sea. Human logic is screaming for an explanation. We want a blueprint, a timeline. Give me a risk assessment report. But God didn't hand over an explanation. He asked for obedience. He just asked for movement. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this isn't just some isolated incident. It's a continuous theme throughout history. Just look at these patterns of trust. Noah, he built an entire ark before a single drop of rain ever fell. Abraham packed up his whole life and left before he even knew his final destination. Peter had to physically step out of the relative safety of the boat before he could ever stand on the water. The miracle in every single one of these stories didn't eliminate the need for trust. The miracle actually invited it. The action absolutely had to precede the outcome. So let's bring this right here front door. What is your Red Sea today? Take a real look at this list. Maybe it's finally launching that business you've been delaying for 3 years because you're waiting for perfect conditions. Actually, scratch that. There's no such thing as perfect conditions. Maybe it's applying for a position that feels just a little bit beyond your current experience level. Or maybe it's sitting down tonight and actually making a budget instead of hiding from your finances out of anxiety. Maybe it's committing to pay off that debt one grueling but totally necessary decision at a time. Or hey, maybe it's choosing radical generosity at the exact moment fear is telling you to hold on to your money as tightly as possible. Identify which one of these resonates with that tension in your gut right now. As we start to wrap this explainer up, I really want you to sit with this question. Ask yourself honestly, what decision have you delayed simply because you wanted absolute certainty? Where has the voice of fear gotten louder than the voice of faith in your life? Are you stuck in this endless loop of preparing forever, or is it finally time to move? What is one wise, calculated action you can take this very week to step toward the water? Here is the bottom line. You only need to take the next faithful step. You don't need to have the whole journey mapped out, you don't need to see the opposite shore, and you certainly do not need to cross the entire sea today. You just need to take the very next faithful step with whatever is already in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I challenge you, go take that step.